In this video, I will show you how to create a perfectly neat edge using the I-cord technique. It looks exactly like an applied I-cord, but instead of picking up the stitches along the raw edges, you knit the I-cord simultaneously with the main fabric of the project. The I-cord edge looks great from all the angles, works with all stitch patterns, and adds this polished look to a final piece. This video is in addition to a step-by-step photo tutorial that I published on my website several years ago. You can find the link to it in the description box below. Today I'm going to show you two variations of the I-cord, double and triple selvage I-cords. We will start with the double one. This is how the double I-cord looks like in a project. You can see these two braids running along the edges on the right side. They look perfectly even. Let's flip it to the wrong side. Looks equally good there as well. The edge created by the double selvage I-cord is pretty flexible and it doesn't pull the fabric at all. To create the double I-cord edge, we will need to add 4 extra stitches to your stitch count. 2 stitches to the beginning of the row and 2 stitches to the end of the row. So those 2 stitches, 1, 2, and at the end 1, 2. And in between you can work in any given stitch pattern. I'm working in a garter stitch. Okay, let's see how it's done. We are going to insert the right needle inside the first stitch and slip it off the left needle without working it, just like that. Your working yarn stays in the back. The next stitch is a simple knit, so we are going to knit 1, just like that. And the rest we are going to work in any given stitch pattern up to the last 2 stitches of the row. I'm working in a garter stitch. You can work in any pattern that you choose. We are going to work to the last 2 stitches of the row, and the first stitch on the left needle we are going to slip with yarn in the back without working it. Insert the needle inside of the stitch from the back as if to purl. Slip it off the left needle without working it, just like that. Your working yarn stays in the back. And the last stitch we are going to purl as usual. And that's it for the right side row. We are going to flip it to the wrong side and see how it's done here. This is the wrong side row. We are going to insert the needle inside the first stitch and slip it off the left needle without working it, with yarn in the back. And the next stitch we are going to purl. Work in any given stitch pattern to the last 2 stitches of the row. I'm working in garter. We are working to the last 2 stitches on the wrong side row. The first stitch on your left needle, we are going to slip off the left needle without working it, with yarn in front of it. So bring the working yarn in front of the left needle. Insert the right needle into the stitch as if to purl and slip it off the left needle without working it. And the last stitch of the row we are going to purl as usual. And that's it. You are going to repeat these 2 last rows to create the double selvage I-cord edge. We are going to bind off the I-cord in pattern on the right side. Slip off the first stitch as if to purl. Knit the next stitch. Pass the first worked stitch over the second one, just like that. And continue binding off in any stitch pattern you work in the rest of your project in. I'm working in garter. you can work in any given stitch pattern. Work to the last 2 stitches of the row. According to the pattern, slip the next stitch as if to purl with your yarn in the back. Pass the first stitch on your needle over the one you just worked. Purl the last stitch, and again pass the first stitch over it to bind it off. And that's it. We are done with the double I-cord edge. You can see how your work looks like at this point. The I-cord looks perfectly even on both sides. Now we are going to work on the variation of the I-cord edge using 3 stitches on each side instead of 2. You can see how much thicker the 3-stitch I-cord looks like compared to 2-stitch I-cord we've just worked at. Here is to compare them. This is why I mostly use triple I-cord edge for the cardigan side edges or accessories. So we are going to work on the first 3 stitches of the row, on those 3 stitches, and on the last 3 stitches of the row. And in between, we are going to work in any given stitch pattern and working in garter. So let's see how it's done. We are going to slip the first stitch with yarn in the back without working it. Try to pull it just a little bit so it's not way too tight. The next stitch here, we are going to slip again off the left needle without working it, but please bring the yarn in front of the needle, just like that. Let's see again how it's done. So you bring the working yarn in front of the left needle, insert the right needle as if to purl inside of the stitch and slip it off without working it. And the third one we are going to knit as usual. The rest we are going to work in any given stitch pattern up to the last 3 stitches of the row. We are coming to the last 3 stitches of the row. The first stitch we are going to knit as usual. Knit 1. The next stitch we are going to slip with the yarn in the front, bring the working yarn in front of the left needle, insert the right needle as if to purl inside of the stitch, just like that, and slip it off the left needle without working it. And the last stitch we are going to purl as usual, just like that. Okay, this is the right side row. We are going to flip the work to the wrong side and see how we are going to work here. The first stitch, slip it off the left needle with yarn in the back, insert the right needle inside of the stitch, slip it off without working it. Knit 1. And slip the next stitch with yarn in front. Bring the yarn in front of the left needle and slip this stitch without working it. And the rest of the project, work in any given stitch pattern. We are coming to the last 3 stitches of the wrong side row. The first stitch we are going to slip with yarn in front, bring the working yarn in front of the left needle, insert the right needle inside of the stitch and slip it off without working it, then knit 1, and the last stitch as usual we are going to purl. And that's it. This is how your work looks like at this point. This is the wrong side of your work. The edge looks perfectly even from all the angles. We are going to bind off the I-cord edge in pattern. Slip the first stitch with yarn in the back, Slip next stitch with yarn in the front, pass the first stitch over the second one, knit the next stitch, and again pass the first stitch over the second one. We are going to continue binding off the stitches as usual in any given stitch pattern, all the way to the last 3 stitches. We are working into the last 3 stitches of the row. Continue binding off in pattern, knit 1, pass the first stitch over the one that we just worked to close it off. Next stitch we are slipping off the left needle with yarn in front, and also we are going to bind it off. And the last stitch we are going to purl and bind off as usual. And that's it. This is how your work looks like at this point. Your triple I-cord edge is done, and it looks perfectly even on both sides and from all the angles. I'm going to share with you one more trick, how to hide the loose ends inside of the I-cord edge. Let's thread the loose yarn end you want to hide through the needle. We are going to use the triple I-cord edge to hide this yarn end inside of it. You can see how you can insert the needle from the side into the tube. You will fill the extra space inside of it. So it'll be pretty easy to thread the yarn through this tube created by the triple I-cord. Try to push the needle as far as you can. The further you push the needle, the more secure the yarn end will be hidden inside of the tube. Pull the yarn through, just like that. And we are going to cut the end of the yarn as close to the edge as possible and adjust the I-cord edge. And that's it. The yarn end has been hidden and nothing is sticking out. It's perfectly secure inside. I also wanted to show you how I use the I-cord edge next to the ribbon stitches. Here I have a double I-cord edge worked next to 1x1 ribbon. I feel like those 2 stitches work perfectly together, especially for the cardigan neckbands. So the I-cord edge will be worked in the first 2 stitches of the row as usual, and on the last 2 stitches of the row, and in between we are working in 1x1 ribbon. Insert the needle inside of the first stitch, slip it off with yarn in the back without working it, and then let's knit the next stitch as usual. On the right side, I always place the purl stitch right next to the I-cord edge. This way double selvage looks like a continuation of the ribbon. Okay, so now I'm going to continue working in 1x1 ribbon until the last 2 stitches of the row. Purl, knit, purl, knit. We are going to work to the last 2 stitches of the row. So the number of 1x1 ribbon stitches between the I-cord edge should be uneven. Here you can see that we started with the purl stitch right next to the I-cord edge, and we are going to end with the purl stitch right before the double I-cord. So the number should be uneven. Let's slip the first stitch with yarn in the back, and the last stitch of the row we are going to purl. This is it for the right side row. Let's flip it to the wrong side, and here it will be easy to identify the wrong side, because you will see that the I-cord edge is right next to the knit stitch. Here is the knit stitch and here is the I-cord edge. so it's easy to know that this is the wrong side. Slip the first stitch with yarn in the back without working it, purl 1, and continue working in 1 by 1 ribbon. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, and so on. We are coming to the end of the row. This knit stitch is the last stitch of the 1 by 1 ribbon, and those 2 stitches belong to the double I-cord edge. We are going to slip the first stitch with yarn in front without working it, and the last stitch we are going to purl. And that's it. You are going to repeat those 2 rows until the desired length of the piece. As you can see, the double I-cord edge is the perfect continuation of the 1 by 1 ribbon. It looks even from all the sides and all the angles, and you don't have to come back and trim your edge after you're done knitting your piece. So now we are going to see how the triple I-cord edge is worked right next to the 2 by 2 ribbon. Here you can see how the I-cord edge looks like from all the sides and all the angles. I'm also putting 2 purl stitches right next to the I-cord edge on both sides, so the edge looks like a continuation of the ribbon. Those 3 stitches belong to the I-cord edge. So let's work them. We will slip the first stitch with yarn in the back. Next stitch we are going to slip with yarn in front without working it. And the next stitch we are going to knit. We are going to continue in 2 by 2 ribbons, started with 2 purl stitches and ending with 2 purl stitches right before the last 3 stitches of the triple I-cord edge. Purl, purl, knit, knit. We are working to the last 3 stitches of the row in 2 by 2 ribbon, and we are going to work those 3 stitches. Knit 1 as usual, just like that. The next stitch we are going to slip with yarn in front without working it, and the last stitch we are going to purl. This is how your work looks like at this point. Let's flip it to the wrong side and work the I-cord on the first 3 stitches. Here you can see this thick edge, so the first 3 stitches belong to the I-cord edge, and 2 knit stitches next to it belong to the 2 by 2 ribbon. So let's slip the first stitch with yarn in the back, insert the needle inside of the stitch, slip it off, knit the next stitch, knit 1, and slip the next stitch with yarn in front without working it, and continue working in 2 by 2 ribbon, knit, knit, purl, purl. And again we are going to work to the last 3 stitches of the row. We are going to slip the first stitch with yarn in front, just like that, without working it. Next stitch we are going to knit, knit 1, and the last stitch we are going to purl as usual. And that's it. This is how the triple I-cord edge looks like next to the 2 by 2 ribbon. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. I feel like this technique is so universal. I myself used it in a lot of my designs, and I'm sure you can implement this technique in a lot of your current knitting projects. So if you still have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I will make sure to answer them. And please subscribe to my brand new channel. I would really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next week with new knitting tips.